food or scavenging. Food security is the opposite of being food insecure. And the way to move to food security from food insecurity is through doing food justice work. And food justice, the idea that healthy food is a human right. Food justice is the belief that what is lacking is not food, but the political will to fairly distribute food regardless of the recipient's ability to pay. And the reason why a lot of our communities that we serve are food insecure is because of, I never used the term food desert. I never really try to use other terms that people use in this space, but we try to use the term food apartheid. If you know what apartheid is, it was the system of government in South Africa that basically kept people of color, Native Africans, the same way this country does with a lot of people of color here. Based on the color of your skin, you're oppressed into one financial category. Because of your race, you're not allowed to get education. And the same thing, the parallel goes with food. There's a reason why if you go to a grocery store in Brownsville, the food quality is a lot less and a lot poorer than it would be if you went to a supermarket on the Upper West Side or in Park Slope, Brooklyn, or Brooklyn Heights. So it's structural racism, it's economic injustices, it's everything else that we see playing out now politically and that people are pushing back against. But with the right support, not just from government, but with the right support from communities and us working together, we can work towards being a food sovereign city, a food sovereign country, where people they have the right for the healthy and culturally appropriate foods, but it's within their hands to grow it, to build it, to have the restaurants they want, to make money off of those restaurants, and just be financially sound and have a healthy agricultural system. So everyone has enough food for everyone to go around. There's plenty of food to go around now, which leads to my talk about food waste and food rescue. So I'll go to the next slide. Come on. Why isn't it going? Okay, so food insecurity in New York, like even before the pandemic, like 2.4 million people, working age people in New York City were struggling to meet ends meet. Like I said, I didn't consider myself to be one of them, but I was. But since the start of the pandemic, you saw in the newspapers, on the news, people were out of work, and there was a drastic increase in the amount of food insecurity in all of our communities. 1 in 4, really it was closer to 1 in 3 children were experiencing food insecurity, not having enough food to eat, relying on emergency food, relying on going to a school to get those sandwiches or hot meals from that the city was doing. And then more than 49% of them visited a food pantry or some type of emergency food network. And so a lot of the other reasons why that happens, like New York City, the poverty line, the federal poverty line dictated by the USDA says that you're not able to feed yourself if you make $20,000 or less. But in New York City, it's a lot more than that. Like those USDA standards don't really take into account what it takes for a family of 3 or 4 to feed themselves after they pay their bills. In New York City, for your family to go to school, for you to go to work, that's car fare. So it's a family of 4. I mean, that's whatever the subway is now, $2.75 times 4 twice a day. And then if you have children in daycare, you have to go and pick them up from daycare. So you're spending, $30 sometimes a day in car fare just to get you and your family to where you have to go. So we've embarked on a self-sufficiency standard study with the United Way, with the Food Bank, as well as the Women's Center for Career Advancement, as well as the Fund for the City of New York, that says that a family of 4 really needs like a median income in the city of about $76,000 to do everything they need to do. Because if you live outside of the city where you have a house, or you most likely have a washer and dryer in your house, most likely you may have a car, but here to go grocery shopping if because of gentrification, the grocery store you used to go to is now a high rise. You know, now you have to take a cab to the grocery store. The laundromat that you used to go to is closed, so you have to take a cab to the laundromat. So everything costs a lot more just to exist in New York City. So as I mentioned, City Harvest is a food rescue organization, which means we rescue food that would otherwise go to waste. And we get the food from grocery stores, from farmers, from manufacturers, food distributors, restaurants. Like I said in the beginning, the original model, all of our food came from primarily restaurants and caterers. But now those restaurants actually make food for us versus what they're going to throw out at the end of the night. We don't do that because of safety precautions and guidelines with food banks, but they'll actually make food for us. And so a lot of restaurants, like from Panera Bread or Au Bon Pain to, you know, like Michelin star restaurants like Le Bernardin or like Shake Shack, or that's not a Michelin restaurant, but Shake Shack. And a lot of other restaurants donate food to us, and we deliver this. We have, like I said, we have a fleet of trucks. We deliver those food items to the soup kitchens and the food pantries and community food programs free of charge. And then we also partner with our community members to have community food distributions as well as our mobile markets. Our mobile markets, there are 9 of them around the city, and they're free produce giveaways that we set up similar to a farmer's market, where we give away primarily produce. So what type of food do we rescue? We try to really focus on produce. You know, everything from cabbage and sweet potatoes to broccoli, things that are hardy and won't get damaged. It's hard for us to really get lots of greens or lettuces and things. One, the packaging may take up too much space on the truck, but also they don't really keep that well. If it's donated food, a lot of times there's a short window of time before it actually goes bad. So green leafy things, it's hard for us to really maintain. We have a food rescue facility where we have all of our refrigeration, and we repack all the foods and goods to be sent out via the trucks. Then 29% of the stuff is packaged goods, shelf-stable items, you know, like canned goods, rice, beans. Sometimes we get meat, dairy. Like I said, some of it's prepared. Most of the prepared things go to our soup kitchens. And then a lot of bakeries will donate a lot of food. So like I said, you can see where the food comes from. Focus on farms and green markets, only 13%. New York State is, as you know, is like I believe the 3rd largest agricultural producing state, but City Harvest and the food banks get very little of our produce from local farmers, all because of silly guidelines like that prohibit us from working directly with farmers. So we'll go to a green market like Union Square and we'll rescue food from farmers there, and the farmers will say, hey, like I want to donate directly to you. How do we do that? But because of the county that they live in, like the farmers up there have to work directly with food banks in their community. And if there isn't one, I mean, so it's a headache to try and create those relationships because of rules and regulations. But so one good thing that came out of COVID, I'm getting ahead of myself, but one good thing that came out of COVID was a program called Nourish NYC. Nourish New York, which allowed farmers who primarily work with restaurants and grocery stores who were turning their crops over because they lost their primary customers. So the state opened up a budget that would pay these farmers for their crops, and emergency food providers, food banks, would get the food from them. So the most common causes of why someone would donate food and where it comes from. So like I said, if a farmer is grown too much of one item, or the store didn't have as many customers as possible, like it was a slow market or a backed up inventory, and they have to get rid of it, it's shelf stable. So I have way too many sweet potatoes, like who can I give it to? One time, a couple of months ago, I got a call from someone in the Department of Agriculture. They had like 10,000 pounds of pineapple and wanted to know if we could take it. And certainly, because how often do we get pineapple? Another reason why is labeling. If packages are mislabeled, something happened at the processing plant, at the packager, and they misspelled something, or they didn't list an ingredient on the package, or the company logo, like the printer spelled the name wrong, they can't send that to a grocery store or to a distributor. So we'll get a call that we can donate it. Some of the stuff is donated to us, but then also we have to buy a lot of food. Like the food goes into sort of a what would you call it? I don't even know what to call it, but we bid, like food banks will bid against each other to get certain things. Storage space, like, I mean, they dropped off way too many cans of tomatoes. They dropped off way too many cabbages. Like, I don't have anywhere to put it. So can you take it? Or maybe the storage space that they're using didn't meet the USDA specifications, so they can't keep it. Quality defects, like we all know about working at a farm stand, you see how people turn their nose up at certain items, like there's dirt on it, or like people think that everything comes out of the ground looking like it does in a grocery store. Like there's no dirt and everything is exactly the same size. So farmers, they'll sell the perfect foods to the grocery stores, to the distributors, but the ugly stuff either if it doesn't go to a caterer or some type of food processor, what's left, that's what the food banks get. So a lot of the food waste, a lot of times, is because of ugly fruit, ugly produce. Condition defects. If the can is dented, if you remember, a lot of grocery stores have a dented cans aisle. I mean, not aisle, but a display. So people don't want to buy it. No, the can's dented or it's nearing the expiration date. So they don't want it. So a lot of the stuff we get, particularly package items, are because of condition defects. And then grade defects, I mean, that's a combination of quality and condition. So our food, like I said, we have a network of 400 soup kitchens and food pantries all around the city, but we also work with our community partner markets and our mobile markets. But because of the pandemic, a lot of our food pantries, like a quarter of our food pantries, 100 of our food pantries, closed down for various reasons, either because of illness or out of fear. Most food pantries are usually in houses of worship, and they're volunteer based. So if the lead volunteer, the person with the keys to the church or to the synagogue, is sick or they can't make it, they can't do the pantry, like people were afraid to come out. So we've helped the majority of them to reopen, but there's still a little less than 20 that haven't reopened yet, and we're working with them to help them reopen. Also, since they're volunteer based, we got rid of our volunteer core. A lot of the work that City Harvest does is because of our volunteer core, and the same thing with food pantries. A lot of them didn't have any volunteers, so we had to help them find volunteers. And a lot of people set up, you've probably heard of mutual aid groups all around the city. Mutual aid groups sort of filled that gap to help with food distributions. So to meet those needs in those communities where the food pantry shut down, we actually set up emergency relief sites with different community partners. And these are people that may have had a pantry before, but they had access to larger space, or just someone that wanted to make a difference. There was a group in Queens that ran a school, but I mean, their school was closed because of COVID. And they're like, well, we can do a food distribution here. And they became one of our largest distribution sites and became sort of a hub and spoke for our entire operation. So you can see where they all are. Unfortunately, before you all got on the call, we were talking about how Staten Island, there's great need in Staten Island, but there's just not that much programming there. And hopefully we can rectify that. And we're always looking at how we can benefit Staten Island a little bit better. So you don't have to really look at the numbers and everything, but this is just showing from the inception of the COVID crisis, from the very beginning, we normally, each month we were doing about $5.5 million, 5.5 million pounds distributed to our network. And that steadily increased to July. That's where it sort of reached an apex for last year. And then once people started getting their PPP, And once people started getting like their pandemic unemployment and their all the other COVID stimulus checks, you saw the need slowly go down, which shows that if people have money to buy food, they're not necessarily going to wait in line at a food pantry. The whole concept of emergency food, I hate the term emergency, because if an emergency doesn't last for your lifetime, an emergency doesn't mean every week you have to go to 2 or 3 pantries to feed your family. So, but it just shows how up and down, depending on what was happening in the newspaper and with Congress and with pandemic economic relief, people were coming to the food pantries. People who had never been hungry before, never been food insecure before, were visiting food pantries, and we met that need. And like I said, it was a little more than 200 million pounds. So I already explained a lot of this. Like I said, we opened up 31 emergency food distribution sites in high need neighborhoods. We donated, we had about 193,000 prepared meals donated by our restaurants. We worked everything from donating to pandemic, the emergency workers and essential workers. We had to shift gears because there was a shortage of PPE, of masks and gloves and sanitation. So we would procure a lot of that stuff and deliver it to our agencies. So like 100 agencies were receiving PPE at a regular basis. And our mobile market, the people that we served, that I don't know what the percentage was, but we went up at probably doubled the number of households that were served by our mobile markets. And because of us not having a volunteer corps, another good thing that came out of this is that we had to hire temporary staff, part-time temporary staff. Now they're most likely, some of them will become permanent, to do our repacks, which means like that pallet of apples, we can't give everybody a case of apples. So the stuff comes in on pallets and we unload that and put that into fabric bags to be distributed at our mobile markets, would be distributed to our food pantry network. So after a year, this is a short film that, how do I get to it? Let me come out of this. I'm going to show a short little video that just explains our COVID response over the last year. Get to it. New share. Share sound. Share.
Keith, we can't see that screen.
Everyone thought this thing would just blow over. Maybe a couple of weeks.
Hey, Keith.
2 or 3 months. Can you see it? But it's been
No,
a year.
we can't see that screen. I think you have to close out of your presentation screen or minimize the screen.
Yeah, sorry.
You might have to stop sharing and share again.
Yeah, I did that.
Oh.
Yeah.
For some reason it's.
I'll do it again.
Mm-hmm. Great.
All right. Can you see that?
Yes, we can. Great.
Can you hear it?
Yes.
I remember last March, everyone thought this thing would just blow over. Maybe a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 months, but it's been a year. 1 year. 1 year of our trucks crisscrossing the city. 1 year of long days and long weeks. 1 year of our coworkers stepping up and going above and beyond to do what needs to be done. We've done it before. Superstorm Sandy, the government shutdown, but this is different. This is everybody. 1 year of new safety protocols and what has become our new normal, and the lines are still long and growing. We didn't do it alone. We couldn't do it alone. We saw the city and the people around the country come to help us out. You stepped up. You donated food, you donated your time, your money. Our restaurant friends, they stood with us. Mutual aid groups filled the gaps. You called to ask what we need. You all came together. We all came together to feed New York. I don't know what the next year will bring or how long this will last, but I do know we'll get through this together. We are City Harvest. All right. So that we were each asked to reflect on like the pandemic and everything. So they asked me to say a few words, and next thing I know, like I was like the spokesperson in the video, which was kind of cool. Go back to this. Right. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. So another good thing that came out of the pandemic, we revamped our website and we launched a find food map. I mean, I love maps. I love any GIS kind of thing. So this map that's on our website, you can put in your zip code or just your neighborhood. It will show you everywhere in that neighborhood where you have access to some type of food, emergency food distribution or any other type of distribution, everything from like the Department of Education distributions to everything that the city was doing, as well as all the emergency food providers and food banks. Moving forward, I mean, you don't really need to see all this, but like, I mean, we're tapering down. A lot of those high numbers of pounds came from the USDA boxes, the Corona Food Assistance Program, like the federal government to support farmers. They developed these food boxes that a lot of food banks received, and it really made the operation a lot easier and COVID safe. Each box contained dairy, meat, vegetables, some canned goods, but there were a lot of problems with those boxes. Everything from the eggs being broken to things being stale dated to the food not necessarily being nutritious. I mean, a lot of people found out what scrapple was because of those boxes. I never want to eat scrapple. I tasted it once in my life. I never want to eat it again. But people were up in arms about the boxes. So we received lots of calls from congressional members asking what could be done. So congressional members, other food banks all around the country put pressure on the USDA, and we thought that they would improve upon those boxes. But once the Biden administration took over and there was a new secretary of the USDA, secretary of the Department of Agriculture, and new USDA officials, they basically stopped the program. And what money was there, which was also a good thing, I guess. They increased the budget that food banks can use now to buy fruits and vegetables. So it makes our jobs a lot harder. I would have rather seen them revamp the program and improve upon. They held hearings, and listening sessions and everything, but unfortunately, they got rid of that program. But now a lot of that funding came to the states, so New York State was able to invest more into the Nourish New York, which supports local agriculture, because why are we getting produce in these boxes from Idaho and California when we have farmers right here growing the same thing? So if you'd like to get involved with City Harvest, there are many ways. You can volunteer with us, you can donate to us, you can do fundraisers, or just spread the word. Go on our social media, post pictures. If you see a truck, take a picture of a truck and post a picture. But City Harvest, it's new, like I said in the very beginning, it's New York City's answer to food insecurity. And we really can't do anything that we do without the help of all of you, and particularly Grow NYC. Grow NYC is one of the most fantastic partners that we have. So thank you. And thank you, for having me this evening.
Thank you, Keith. That was great. Allison, you're up next.
Fantastic. All right, let me share my screen.
I love the fun fact about Scrapple that's posted.
All right, can you all see this my screen? That's sorry.
We can, yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm Allison Rosenthal, the Chief Program Officer at the Westside Campaign Against Hunger. And we are a very large emergency food provider that works across all 5 boroughs of New York City. And City Harvest is one of our largest food providers. Really, without their partnership, we could not do the work that we do. So it's so nice to be in good company here. I thought that I would just give you a little bit of my background, since I know that many of you are at the beginning of your careers, or maybe some of you guys are still students. But I am a registered dietitian, and I also have my master's degree in food policy and economics. And I've spent the last 17 years now working with a variety of organizations, including the New York City Health Department and Children's Aid, where much of my work has focused on expanding access to healthy foods, and ultimately helping to improve health inequities in lower income neighborhoods of New York City. And I, throughout my career, have worked very closely with Grow NYC. I used to run the Health Bucks program, as well as the Stellar Farmers Markets program, which works at many of the green markets, or the Health Bucks works at all the green markets. And so I'm very familiar with everything, all the great work that Grow NYC does. Keith did a fantastic job explaining what food insecurity is. But just to repeat, food insecurity, as defined by the USDA, means a lack of access by all people at all times to enough food to live an active and healthy life. And I guess what I really want to point out is that prior to the pandemic, as Keith also explained, food insecurity was extremely high in New York City. About 1.2 million New Yorkers, or almost 15% of all New Yorkers, were food insecure. And that was about 21% higher than the national average. So we already had elevated food insecurity levels in New York City. But then when COVID hit, and sort of the economic implications of COVID, that number almost doubled to 2.2 million New Yorkers reporting to being food insecure. And again, what Keith pointed out is that at the beginning of the pandemic, almost 40% of emergency food providers, they closed their doors. And there was a variety of reasons for this, but one of the main reasons is that many emergency food providers are volunteer run, and many of them are run by folks that were at greater risk of contracting COVID. So many senior citizens. And so they made the decision that they needed to, which was to close up their doors. So it put significant strain on those emergency food providers like WISCA and others, to sort of fill in the gaps of the other emergency feeding providers, but also respond to the elevated need that existed in the communities and still exists. The economic recovery of New York City is going to be slow. Much of the service industry was decimated, and that is where, unfortunately, many of our customers did work. Many it's lower wages. Really, some of those jobs really lack any access to benefits, and when those jobs went away, and like restaurants closed, the tourism industry shut down, many of our families, they could no longer keep themselves afloat. So I want to talk about what who West Side Campaign Against Hunger is and sort of how we have helped throughout the COVID pandemic. So the West Side Campaign Against Hunger, or WISCA, as I mentioned before, we're one of the New York City's largest and most successful emergency feeding providers. We've been serving New Yorkers for over 40 years. So this is where, Keith mentioned the word emergency food provider it's really a misnomer, because there is no emergency that lasts 40 years. And so this is really, a much larger issue of food insecurity, of institutional racism. But, the pandemic really was an emergency situation where WISCA was able to serve in a much more elevated capacity to really meet the emergency needs that our communities were experiencing. Just to give you a frame of reference of where we are, so our headquarters is located on the Upper West Side. We're located in the basement of the Church of St. Paul and St. Andrews on 86th Street and West End. And about 4 years ago, we launched a mobile market similar to City Harvest, where we work in partnership with community-based organizations across the city. Our mission is to alleviate hunger by ensuring that all New Yorkers have access with dignity to a choice of healthy food and supportive services. And you could see on the slide that I have here that I bolded dignity, choice, and healthy, because those are really fundamental to our organization and really reflect our core values and are woven into everything that we do at WISCA. WISCA is, we're really best known for innovating what's called the customer choice supermarket style pantry. During non-COVID times, our pantries operated like a small grocery store where we provided our customers with the dignity of making food selections that best met their needs, their preferences, their cultural food preferences, their dietary needs. And this, 30 years ago was kind of revolutionary because most pantries just handed a bag of food to the folks that were coming and kind of disregarded, people's needs and what they wanted and what they liked and didn't like, and kind of was not a very dignified experience. We provide all of our customers with a 4-day supply of food for every household member. And we really pride ourselves on providing healthy food. We really don't provide any processed foods or foods that contribute to chronic disease. And so what people are actually receiving is mostly fresh produce, whole grains, lean proteins, and low-fat dairy. About 70% of the food that we give out has been donated, but we do raise a significant amount of funding that allows us to purchase about 30% of our food. And that's kind of what sets us apart from a lot of the pantries that exist across the city, is that we are able to ensure that no matter when somebody comes to our pantry, that they're going to have a consistent choice of high quality fresh food, and we will never run out. So we will always have enough food to meet the demand for our food at our locations. We also work very hard to address the underlying root causes of food insecurity. We have a team of 5 social service counselors who help our customers to address some of the challenges that they're facing. So we work to help stabilize their families by helping them get connected to a range of supportive services, including SNAP benefits, cash assistance, unemployment benefits, health insurance, assistance with housing, connections to workforce development programs, ESL and GED programs, et cetera. So we really use, food as a way to meet the immediate need, but we're really working hard every single day to really understand what challenges our customers are facing and how we can get their families, our families from a place of acute food insecurity to a place where, you know, they have more cash to actually purchase food, help them get jobs, help them get stable housing, and things like this. So, you know, WISCA's, I just want to describe a little bit about WISCA's COVID response. So, as New York became sort of the epicenter of the pandemic, we had to transform our operations overnight. We had to pivot from our supermarket style pantry that was happening in the basement of the church. And we began pre-packing all of the bags of food that we were providing, and we moved outside like a farmer's market. You know, actually we looked to our Grow NYC. I remember reaching out to the Grow NYC team to ask about what equipment we needed. How do we keep our staff members warm during the cold winter months? What kind of equipment do we need to provide? Because we are now operating year round outside, every single day, providing food to our customers in the same way that many of the farmers and the staff at Grow NYC provides food at the farmers markets throughout all of the varying weather conditions. But, you know, again, like, our goal was to make sure that we were keeping our staff, our volunteers, and our customers as safe as possible. So we went to this grab and go format that really limited any kind of exposure. We had strict safety standards where, you know, we were following all of the hand washing and glove wearing, hair nets, face covering, social distancing, just to make sure that everyone was being as safe as possible. We also transformed the church into a warehouse where we were packing, where we are still packing 300 to 400 bags of food every single day inside of a church. And so you can see on the photo on the left, those are the church pews filled with bags of food that are getting ready to be distributed. And so it's really been an incredible time. We've grown the number of partners that we've worked with by 4 times. So we went from working with an average of 15 community-based partners to bring food and supportive services, where we're now working with 64 different community groups to bring food and supportive services all across the 5 boroughs of New York City. We also tripled the number of customers we served since the pandemic began. And, you know, obviously, in the same way, tripled the amount of meals and poundage of food that we provide within the community. Just to give you a sense of some of our numbers. So based on last year, we served over 77,000 individuals last year, and we distributed more than 4.4 million pounds of food. And for WISCA, this is significant because prior to the pandemic, we were serving under 1 million pounds. So, you know, a different scale than City Harvest. But as you can see, all of the emergency food providers had to, you know, triple, if not more than triple, their operations just to meet to try and meet the elevated need that we were experiencing out in the community. But we did not let that compromise the quality of food that we were providing. So you can see that even though last year we tripled the total poundage, we were still able to maintain 50% of all of our food as fresh produce. And again, just shows that 50% of our food was donated. And again, just to highlight City Harvest as being one of our largest food donation partners. So I wanted to also show you all a video that WISCA made. This video is at the very outset of the pandemic. This video was taken, I believe, in March of when like right after the city shut down. So you will notice in this video, we are not wearing face masks because when this video was shot, face masks were not yet required. So I just want to like reassure everybody that we do follow very strict COVID safety protocol. So let me try and, can you see the screen, the Vimeo screen now?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay,
great. Perfect, we can hear.
Hi, we're here at the corner of 86th and West End, where WISCA's been for the last 40 years, serving the community with healthy food and supportive services. Obviously, things are really different starting today because of COVID-19. our team is distributing food on the street, a way we haven't had to do this in many decades, for safety of our customers, safety of our staff, implementing social distancing, and just making sure at the same time every customer who needs the supports gets access to healthy food, because that's what everyone needs right now.
Westside Campaign Against Hunger has always been flexible and able to respond to things, and that's what you need to do in a situation like this, because who knew we would be at a place like this a couple of weeks ago? We didn't know.
During COVID-19, WISCA has remained true to our mission. We are continuing to provide as all New Yorkers with a choice of healthy food and supportive services during these times. We have, in a matter of days, transformed our entire operations from a choice model grocery store inside the St. Paul and St. Andrew's Church to a street level operation that we set up each and every morning to provide our customers with a large supply of healthy, high quality foods for their families during this time of great need. We've also completely switched our social services from one that meets one-on-one with our customers to a virtual-based social service program. We are using our mobile market resources to bring bags of food to community groups so that the most vulnerable, like the undocumented, like families with young children, like folks with chronic health conditions, that they all can receive food in this time of significant need.
Hi, my name is Monica Estrada Guzman. I'm the program director of Nido de Esperanza and also a community social worker. We work with families here in Washington Heights and Inwood between the ages of 0 to 3. Our families are recent to first generation immigrant families from Latin America and the Caribbean. We're here today because of our great partnership with Westside Campaign Against Hunger, coming alongside with us during this time to really serve our families, to make sure that our families have food on their tables. Partnerships like this really make your work feel greater, and it really empowers you that there's other community agencies in the community that can come alongside you, and they're helping us model community, which is one of the cornerstones of our program.
That's part of how we work, right? We work in collaboration as a team, as one community, whether it's up here at 181st Street working with New York Presbyterian, or downtown at Bellevue where we dropped off 750 kits of food for every discharged food insecure patient who leaves that hospital in the coming weeks, or at 86th Street where every day we're helping hundreds and hundreds of families get access to healthy food, even in the midst of a pandemic, to find solutions to fighting food insecurity and acting on them right away, because we know this is the time to double down as a community to make change. It's not a time for us to sit back and do what's easy. This is the time to test out new ideas and push forward, and we are so thankful that we have a community behind us who sees the same ideas and values and has been with us through thick and thin to make sure that dignity, community, and choice are for everyone in this city. And so we are thankful, and we'll just continue to be bringing out great food and services to folks across New York City. Thank you.
All right. All right. So I just wanted to wrap up by letting you all know how you can get involved with our work. You know, the work that we do at WISCA would not be possible without our volunteers. Every single day, we have 40 to 50 volunteers coming through our location on 86th Street to help us do everything from set up our food distribution, setting up the tents and the tables and making sure everything is sanitary, to helping with the actual food distribution, giving food to customers, to helping us pack the bags that are then going being distributed at 86th Street or that are going out to one of our 64 partners across the city. We also have folks who are helping us unload our food deliveries, break down pallets of food and bring it inside the church so that we can then, pack that food. All of that work would not be possible if it weren't for our volunteers. And so I encourage you, if you're 18 years or older, to go on to New York Care's website, and look for opportunities to volunteer with WISCA. We would absolutely love to have you work with us. So I want to thank you all for having me, and I guess we have a few minutes maybe for some questions.
We do. Thank you so much, Allison and Keith, for sharing your work with us, but also for the incredible work that you do in New York City. I'm definitely going to open it up to questions, but something actually has been running through my mind as we've been talking. And I'm going to share sorry, I meant to do this. I'm going to share a definition with us. So we had a conversation around food justice, and one of the terms that our colleague Chantel brought up was food sovereignty, and it's a system where people who produce, distribute, consume food also control the mechanisms and policies of food production and distribution. And I guess in my head, I'm wondering, like, if the goal is to get to that point, and really what you all are doing is meeting and filling these gaps. Like, what can we be doing? How can we be thinking to getting from where we are, where they're obvious, where the need is great, where there are lots of people in New York City who are obviously food insecure, to a point where like food sovereignty is a reality and that everybody has access, not just access, but like more of an abundance of what we have right now. I guess I'm just like kind of thinking, like, how do we get from where we are right now to a more just space where people don't need to depend on food rescue or food pantries in order to like feed their families?
And for me, I would say like we really need to we have to really focus on a local food system and bringing agriculture. I mean, whether it's growing your own food in a community garden or having a relationship with a farmer upstate, really supporting CSAs, really supporting farmers markets, having more farmers markets in our communities, but also making sure that they're affordable. I mean, I'd rather see the government give money to people instead of, I'm trying to think what the program was. The pandemic unemployment benefits, and people saying that people didn't want to go back to work because they were receiving so much from the pandemic unemployment. So why not have the government give those small businesses that like can't afford to give people a raise, like give them the money to keep people working so they can have not just I hate the term living wage, but I mean, just give them, and I'm the furthest thing away from a socialist that you'd ever find. It's particularly in this space, but it makes no sense for us, like this charitable response and sort of welfare-minded response to everything that we do just keeps communities down instead of being resilient. Like if you have enough money, you can invest, you can start your own business, you can buy your own food, which supports other businesses, supports more farmers, which means they can buy more land, which means they can grow more food. So it's all connected, but I think we really have to think locally in the very beginning and get more people involved in the local food system.
Yeah. And I would say just, an area of emphasis for WISCA now that we are a year and a half or so into the pandemic is we actually recently hired a community engagement coordinator, because one of our big growth areas is we want to be able to leverage the voices of our customer base to really influence policy. And whether that policy be around immigration or housing, but all of the issues that really impact our customers and really affect their food security. I think that we really need to be pushing some of the policies to be in favor for our community that will allow them to have living wages or, things of that nature. But I do think that there have been, some good things that have come out of this pandemic. And I think like just thinking about the emergency feeding space, I think programs like Nourish, where it's keeping the money in at least New York State, is a move in the right direction to just supporting local economies and supporting jobs and things like that, as opposed to more corporate ag out west somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, when we go to like conferences like Closing the Hunger Gap, I'll meet people from whether it's Portland, Maine to Portland, Oregon, and all those food banks have a relationship with a farmer. Like I've met farmers there that say, like, oh, I grow food for this pantry, for that pantry, for this food bank. New York State's the only place where that doesn't happen. I won't say the only one that I know of where it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it really forced like the development of whole new like food supply chains, because there was so much money infused into the emergency feeding sector that really forced us to make relationships with vendors in ways that we hadn't before.
Yeah.
Thank you. Isabel, go ahead.
Hi, so can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so now that you mentioned supply chains, one question I was thinking of the entire time was, has there been any impact? I know I've heard a lot about supply chains being disrupted. Have you noticed that in the emergency food space, and have there been certain items that have been harder to come by, and is there a gap that needs to be filled in a way?
Well, the one big thing right now that we're experiencing supply shortage is actually turkeys. So like as we WISCA is like committing to distributing over 7,000 turkeys this holiday season. And I mean, we've been able to fortunately access turkeys through the Food Bank of New York City, but all of our vendors we've reached out to try and get cost comparisons, and all of them said universally that they just simply did not have access to turkeys this year. And so therefore the pricing of turkeys is like sky high. That's really been like the most pressing thing. Immediately at the very outset of the pandemic, we did have some challenges with things like rice and pasta. We had trouble with like shelf stable milk. There were certain products at the very earlier stages of the pandemic that we did have trouble with, but I think it's for us, it has stable. It's become a little bit more stable.
Yeah, definitely poultry and other proteins, I'd say. I mean, and a lot of it, I mean, you heard about the processing plants out west, as the COVID wave moved, into those areas and people got sick, that disrupted. But I mean, now, I mean, it's the shortage, like so many more people are at home, so more people are cooking. So that creates less donated food and less food available for emergency food as well. So, I mean, definitely turkeys, like this time of year, I mean, turkeys. And on another way it's affected City Harvest, we're moving to Brooklyn, to a facility where finally, after 31 years, everyone will be under one roof, versus our food rescue facility being in Queens and us being in Manhattan. We're all going to be under one roof in Sunset Park, but we can't finish the renovations to the building because a lot of the materials that we need, to put the walls up and everything else, are on ships at sea or waiting to get on a train.
And yeah, that's wow. The one area that we've also had challenges with is that and I'm sure maybe this affected City Harvest too, but there's been a significant driver shortage. And so when we work with some of our vendors, deliveries have been delayed. It's hard to get like reliability when it comes to receiving product in a timely manner because of the driver shortage. We also had worked with a number of different home, food delivery services. So we were delivering food directly to people's homes, like via different groups like Uber Eats, DoorDash, other groups like Ride Along. And again, there was driver shortages with those groups as well. And so it affected our work in that we weren't able to reliably get food to people when we said that we were going to.
Yes, we can
City Harvest
definitely.
is always hiring for drivers, if you know anyone.
Oh, Keith, you're very
cagey about our drivers right now.
Yeah.
I feel like we're all experiencing that same thing. I know
Yeah.
our staff on the ground is very familiar with the driver shortage because we've had driver shortages with Grow NYC Wholesale and
Yeah.
and being able to get the routing that we want and getting, you know, produce delivered to our own programming sites on time. So we've struggled with that too. It's crazy.
I guess one thing that Allison touched on with asking once the shutdown happened and just safety protocols and everything and reaching out to others to find out how to set things up. One thing that we did, our network capacity team expanded and we worked with a lot of those pantries that shut down or even to prevent them from shutting down. So we went to them and said, well, what do you need so you can give out more food? So whether it's refrigeration units, we had offered grants, some funding for shelving, for pallet jacks and forklifts. And my team, a lot of it was reaching out to elected officials to see if they could support that type of work. Every borough president, except for Queens, has bought us a truck over the last couple of years. Starting to find drivers for those trucks, but but they've all bought us trucks. So I mean, but the pandemic we've raised more money because of the awareness. Now everyone realizing how close they are to being food insecure. Like we receive calls from, I mean, like the Lower East Side, like Gramercy, like one of our biggest distributions was in Stuyvesant Town, which, you know, like those people would walk past the distribution with their nose up half the time. But now here, the biggest one in Manhattan is right in your backyard.
Folks, are there any other questions before we log off? Great. Well, Keith and Allison, thank you so much for joining us. I have so much to think about, but something that I think is kind of like a theme in our conversations around food access is how important it is to pay attention to policy, how important it is to connect to our local officials. And I think we talked about it last week, but I think that is something that I definitely am going to go away thinking about how much more can I get involved in our local policy to make it easier, one, for folks to be able to afford food, but also for folks like you doing all this really great work to do your work easily and to be able to provide food that people want, that people will enjoy, but that is also like good for our local food system. So thank you so much for your time. It was great having you.
One immediate way is for you and everybody else to really reach out to your Congress people and ask them to pass the Build Back Better bill. I mean, that will dramatically change the lives of so many Americans and really affect Allison and myself and the work that our organizations do. The lines will shorten and there will be less people in need for emergency food.
Angela, I see you off mute. I don't know if you have something to share.
Sorry, no, I just was going to say, goodbye to everyone at the end. So I already put it on you. Sorry.
That's okay. All right. Well,
thank you, Keith and Allison. We really appreciate you, taking the time to, talk to everyone tonight. It was a wonderful presentation, just really raising the awareness of these really critical issues around food insecurity in the city and beyond.
Yes. And lastly, I'm going to put a link in the chat for the youth. Please complete our evaluation. It really helps us build these conversations. Have a good night, all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.